What's going on? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and from the nationally syndicated The Woody Show. On Hoppe Hour right now is the host, Woody. What's going on, bro?
I like how you say to call in at a certain time, and then you go right into it. There's no small talk whatsoever.
Well, I haven't talked to you in a minute, man. Like, we've talked a lot over the years, but then we'll go 2 years without talking and then 6 months. So how's everything been? I mean, I haven't talked to you in a minute. You're doing real well.
No news is news, you know? It's like, it's a day-to-day. Nothing super exciting. Just getting up, still got a job, so that's good. Still getting a paycheck.
Over the years, you were unemployed for a little bit, and then you went to St. Louis after your first time in San Francisco, so you knew about being unemployed. So every day that you get to go to your dream job in Los Angeles, how grateful are you to be employed with such a massive audience?
Sometimes you got to remind yourself, it's just like anything else, everything becomes a job, right? So I remember when I was unemployed, I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to take it for granted again. And then, somewhere maybe even in the first couple of weeks of the alarm clock going off again in the middle of the night to go to work, you have that moment where you take it for granted. But, it's the job I've always wanted to do. And, like I said, lucky enough to be able to do it. I never thought that I would be doing anything other than making a full-time living in radio. That was the only goal. So everything that's happened from, after getting on the air full-time has not been any part of any kind of plan. It just kind of happened. So, I'm as surprised as anybody.
Has getting up in the morning gotten any easier or not really?
No. And we do it a little bit differently than others do it because we do syndicate west to east. So I get up at 1:00 in the morning. I'm out of my house by 1:30 by the time I've showered and gotten dressed, stumbled out of the house. I'm at the radio station by 2. And then we go on the air for the East Coast at 3 a.m. Pacific time, and on the air till 10 a.m. Pacific on the West Coast. So it's a long day, but getting up certainly at that time isn't any easier. But I do get jealous from time to time when I see some of the other people on the other stations. They're rolling in. Some of them even tape out their 6 a.m. hour, so they're not even arriving until about 20 till 7. I'm like, wow, that's like vacation.
Well, and you guys don't really do best of before your show like other syndicated shows where you guys are just live. So some shows would maybe begin at 4 a.m. if they had best of, but you guys are just doing live content.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a time shift from trying to have all your best material in prime hours, 7 and 8 o'clock hours. As a morning show will tell you, that's where you want the majority of your A material. But being on, west going east, you're always in somebody's 7 or 8 o'clock hour. So I think the only one that we are able to repurpose a little bit is not the whole thing, but just little bits and pieces of our first hour on the East Coast, because they didn't hear anything that happened after 7 a.m. for us in the West Coast didn't air on the East Coast. So we're able to take a little bit of that stuff and repurpose it to 6 a.m. But otherwise, yeah, you're right. Everything is, as you hear it.
So I have an uncle that lives out in Los Angeles since 1979, and he was just the biggest Kevin and Bean fan. And when that show finally ended, he began listening to you guys, and now he listens every morning. Do you see that as a trend out in Los Angeles, that you guys are gaining new listeners every day?
I mean, that's the goal. The format that we're on, alternative rock, isn't exactly setting the world on fire. So it's not like there's a ton of people who just kind of naturally stumble upon your station, like maybe it used to be before all these different distractions or competitors, streams, satellite radio, you name it. But yeah, I mean, we're a similar format to K-Rock. Their hardcore listeners are our secondary listeners. Our hardcore listeners are their secondary listeners. And so there's going to be some, people checking things out one way or the other. Now, when we first got to LA, nobody knew who we were because the station that I'm on now was in 23rd place in our key demo. And then outside of that, it was nowhere. And Kevin and Bean were number one. And so it took a while to kind of get awareness. But for the most part, once people started sampling us, we had people that were sticking around and coming back for more. And then they made a couple of bad management decisions over the years, getting rid of a couple key people on the show unceremoniously. So that kind of angered their base. And so the people who didn't even necessarily want us to give us a chance all of a sudden found themselves giving us a chance because they were just angry. Mm-hmm. And that got us some people. And then inevitably Kevin and Bean just all together went away. Bean moved to England or wherever he went. And, Kevin's now working at a different station in Los Angeles. And so then once that was completely disbanded, then we even see some more people there. But, I want listeners of every station to listen to us in the morning and then listen to whatever else it is that you like throughout the rest of the day, be it music or sports talk or political talk, whatever it is. Have us be your choice in the morning. So until we have a 100 share, I'm not going to be satisfied. So I don't think I'll be satisfied anytime soon.
Well, the one thing that I've always respected about you and that I've tried to emulate is the way that you don't respond to like people that try to begin like quote unquote radio wars. That's just never been your thing. And you've always figured out a way to shut it down. Whenever it seems like you've been attacked, you not attacking back was your response, if I'm correct.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very like 80s, early 90s, I think, kind of move. And I think, if you're lucky enough to have somebody who's there listening to you, what is the benefit? I mean, all the radio wars where like one show is fighting with another show only benefits, I think, the people who are working on either show. Like, I don't think there's really much in it for the audience. And I think that's one thing that's changed with PPM as opposed to, diary listening or diary measurement is, it's what you're actually doing, not what people perceive that you do. It's what they're actually listening to. So, you better hope this radio war, whatever you're doing, is really compelling stuff and not just you smashing some other radio show, which nobody even cares about. Otherwise they'd be listening to it. Or sometimes it's a lesser show that's ripping on what is really the better show. And you're having your listeners go and listen to this better show and go, wait a minute, this is actually pretty good. I like this. So you better be pretty confident if you're sending people out and say, oh my God, listen how bad this guy sucks. This show sucks. You better be pretty confident that what you're putting out on a daily basis is better than what they're doing, because they could end up costing you, more than just a radio war. And the other thing is, the industry is super small, as you know.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand. Like, we're all doing the same thing. I don't care that you work at another station. I don't see you as the enemy. I'm not fighting you. Like, it's like NFL players or basketball players after the game, they're doing a jersey swap or, hugging it out at the 50-yard line. I just don't see why there needs to be this divide.
Well, the other thing that I noticed that you do is that you view it as a job. You talk about, this is a Monday, I don't really feel like being here right now. And there's other radio hosts that view it as like it's their all or nothing. For example, you tweeted out about Eric in the morning like 6-8 months ago, and I responded that he was weird to me at the boot camp, and you said that at the end of the day, you tweeted at me that radio is just a job, and that's really helped me relax. And I feel bad for people when all they have is their show. Like, that's a sad way to live.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much only have my show, which is true. I mean, I don't really have any hobbies. That's besides what's for dinner tonight. I think, hey, what hobbies do you have is my second least favorite question.
Yes.
Because I really just think about, I love radio, and I didn't get into it because, I get to meet bands or go to concerts. I just love the medium. I love the storytelling of it. I love being able to kind of paint a picture, and, you can kind of create whatever you want. And I always thought that part was super cool. So I do think about it, but it's not like oh my God, all you do is work because you're running from anything. I just don't have anything else that I enjoy nearly as much. I should probably discover that, because at some point I'll want to do that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, radio wars or someone's a dick to you that you met in the industry. It happens all the time. There's way too much ego in an industry like radio. I don't understand. I mean, I guess everybody who's quote a performer in some way, shape, or form has some kind of swagger, has some kind of ego. I guess you have to in a certain way. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you're not the Beatles. You know, you're not like a legitimate celebrity. There's only been a few of us in radio who have, you know, become celebrities. Howard Stern is one, you know, like who have become legitimate celebrities. The rest of the 99.9999% of us are just people who are doing a job. So that's when I say it's just a job, like who cares? Like Eric was a dick to you. Well, yeah. Look how things turned out. Look how things turned out for him. You know, it turns out he's not such a great guy overall. Now he's not doing anything, you know, and he lost everything because not only was he a dick to you, apparently he was a dick to his wife and in his relationship. So, you know, I always tell people, like, you know, don't put everything on it. Whereas if one thing doesn't happen or one thing doesn't go the way, it doesn't fall the way you think, it crushes your spirit.
So how do you keep track of all the markets you're in and the PPM ratings? Do you at some point just hope for the best, or do you know what's going on in Indianapolis and what's going on in Philly?
I don't. I mean, I hear things from time to time. I don't even really pay attention much to the ratings in Los Angeles, and that's obviously my key market. That's the market that the company cares about the most. And it's intentional. I think it's easy to get kind of distracted by that stuff. And, you know, let's say you got some numbers out today and they weren't very good. Well, those are from 3 weeks ago. So if you start panicking and trying to change things up or focusing too much of that, it's like a hitter is in a slump, you know, like but the difference is these aren't like you've had 2 bad games in a row and now you're in the dugout trying to think of what the hell you're going to do for the next game, how to relax at the plate. These numbers were calculated 3 weeks earlier. So what comes out next week, and we've seen it before, where it's like you suck 1 week and then it's fantastic the next week. And then it's okay the third week, but then the 4th and 5th and 6th weeks, then man, now you're on a roll. So I think it's just more of being confident in what you do, and it's all averages. It's like playing the stock market. If you're reacting every day, the market's down and pulling your money, you're going to lose in the long term. But, you know, let it ride, make smart investments. You know what you're doing with the show. Know that what you're doing has a purpose, and that the content you're doing is what you think is, you know, something that your audience is either going to find entertaining, compelling, intriguing, enraging, some kind of passionate, emotional response, and then just give it time. You know, if you have a straight year where you're stuck in the root, then then there's going to be a problem. But I'm sure at that point, whether you're paying attention, whether I'm paying attention to the ratings or not, the company's going to come say something. So I haven't been in that spot. They haven't come and talked to me about ratings not being good. I usually hear about them, you know, when they're doing pretty well.
How accurate do you think the ratings setup is?
They're not, but I mean, you can't complain about it because it's the same for everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not like one station has a best of meters. There's very few meters at any given market. And so that's why I kind of, like, at least my strategy is why I'm not an alternative rock morning show. I'm a morning show that happens to be on an alternative rock radio station. But I'm trying to grab people from outside of that niche format and just try to go across the board in a demo and target a demo as opposed to a lifestyle or a music preference. Have a better chance of catching meters.
Now, over the years, have you been bothered by haters if you've made a magazine and they talked crap, or a PD talked crap, or people online talked crap, or have you been able to like ignore the concept of a hater over the years?
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, haters have a place on our show. Like, I know it's like kind of weird. It might be like a thing for a therapist. I enjoy dissent more than I enjoy people saying, "Oh man, I love the show." It's nice. Like people say they love the show, or, you know, "Oh my God, that was so funny," or whatever. I love the reaction from people who are so bent out of shape about whatever it is, especially because it is what it is. It's a show. Obviously, you know, well, then you got your money's worth because you didn't pay for it. We're not a subscription service. You have no reason to really be disgruntled other than the time that you spent on it. But now you're spending even more time sending me an email about a show you didn't pay for that you could have easily turned to. And it's not like we're the only show you can get. There's a billion options, as we mentioned, out there. So I find more entertainment in that. I think the listeners do too. We do a couple segments, where those people get acknowledged, and something we certainly never shied away from. I don't care. They don't. People say, "Oh, well, the listeners, they're the ones who sign your paycheck." They really don't. It's the people. At least not the people who hate you. The people who hate you could probably help you get more listeners, because they're the ones that are posting about you on social, and they'll be happy to tag you. One of the best billboards that we've ever done, and yeah, we actually have billboard marketing money here in LA, but one of the billboards that I saw the biggest reaction from, that we actually did pick up a lot of listeners that had its intended response, was a billboard that said, "You'll probably hate it." It just had the Woody Show logo on it, said, "You'll probably hate it." And people wanted to know why they would hate it. So if somebody's on social media talking about how much you suck and your show blows and blah, 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 I think even if they have 4 followers, those 4 people might be pretty interested. Like, dude, is it really that bad? And then they tune in. And that goes back to, as long as you're focused and, making sure that you're putting out the best content you think you have for your target demo and the people that you're trying to talk to, you'll probably get those people. And if anything, they're going to help you out. And then the people who already love the show and have constructive criticism, that's different. Constructive criticism is different than just people trolling and being shitheads.
Yeah, and the people that are being shitheads, if they listen the whole time, they gave you ratings, so you won.
Yeah, all I need is 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All I need is 5 minutes in any 15-minute period, and I don't care what they say or what they do or what reason they're listening. They listen, and I've gotten your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Over the years, Woody, who have been some mentors that have helped you improve your craft as a host?
Well, early on, it was just listening to the radio and hearing, different stations or shows, or, not shows, different stations or DJs at the time that I thought, wow, they're really good. It sounds really big. I really like that big sound. And, but as I got into being on the radio, there was a guy, Phil Manning, who programmed The End in Seattle for a long time. And, he's out of radio now, but, he really got me thinking about, every time you're going on the air, even if you're talking about the same thing, let's say you were talking about the same exact event every break for 2 straight hours, how can you make that break sound different every single time over those 2 hours? So it's stuff I think about all the time, or a lot of the cliche stuff coming up all around the corner at the top of the hour, like these like little radio cliches. Like, he was very, much against that and would fine us like money out of our own pocket every time in an air check that he would hear one of those. So I think a lot about that. And a lot of it's just kind of like, I think just being a student and just listening and hearing different things and, being open to constructive criticism from people. But at the end of hearing everybody out, like, you still have to, at some point find your own way. You can only emulate people for so long. And then you got to kind of find, I was watching that documentary about George Carlin. I don't know if you watched that on HBO.
I need to watch it.
George Carlin, The American Dream. It's really interesting. I mean, he started off like, and he wanted to be these other guys that he had seen on TV and movies or whatever. And so he was doing like the suit and tie comedy routine with, like a team comedy thing. And then I think if I got this right, he dropped acid or did something, and it kind of opened his mind. All of a sudden, he became the George Carlin that everybody knows and that everybody knew until he died. It was just his own, his own truth, his own self that he then put out there and just owned it. And so, he was able to use the experience, even though he was emulating other people or doing other things and, getting what he would call cheap laughs. He eventually found his stride, and I think it's what the best radio people do. Maybe you get inspired by something or a band, you get inspired by another band, but then eventually you develop your own sound. Maybe inspired, but you develop your own sound within that. So, mentors, Phil Manning, definitely one. This other woman, Michelle Stevens, helped me out a lot. Tommy Mattern, who programs the Point in St. Louis, he's just always been like a supporter, and not so much like a coach per se, but like just a person who always had your back. And then shows, Howard or Opie and Anthony, back in their day, those are two pretty big influential shows.
I think what was big about Opie and Anthony for me, because I'll go back and listen to old shows online, is they were like the original podcast before there were podcasts, because they were just such a different radio show than what was out.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely took a lot more risks, and I think, Howard had to kind of figure that out as he went along, right? Because it was so much more strict and, people kind of looking over his shoulder. And then by the time Opie and Anthony came around, like the door is kind of wide open. In fact, maybe a little too wide open, because then, the Janet Jackson thing happened and the Super Bowl, and that really kind of put a huge damper on a lot of that type of content or those types of shows. And so it was either adapt or you were done. Among the other things that can, take a show apart, kind of like what happened to theirs. But, yeah, I mean, it was just more of that kind of, ensemble kind of. You had Jimmy and you had Ant and you had Opie and like the different comedians that would come through, Bill Burr, Patrice O'Neill, like those dudes. And it just kind of had like that hang feel, which is, I think, what you're talking about with podcasts. But, even the best podcasts have a lot of structure to them. You may not feel it, but it has a lot of structure to it. You know what it is, why you're there. And then the people do a pretty good job of getting to where they're going and saying, getting to the point of what they want to say, the payoff, so to speak.
What is it that you do when you're talking to get to the point so you're not like long-winded when you're talking?
Off the air, as you can hear, I'm way more long-winded than I am on the air. On the air, how can I say this in the like I'll kind of just skip around, almost like almost like on a podcast where you're gonna hit 15 second. I'm always I have that in my head as I'm telling a story. There's so many details you don't necessarily need to know. It could be as simple as, dude, this guy pissed off his wife chopped his dick off, put it in the garbage disposal. Like, you don't have to go, dude, there's this guy, he was at home, he and his wife got into an argument,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah. So if I'm trying to set up like the crazy, the craziest thing that X, Y, Z, you can kind of use that as your example, but you probably only need 3 sentences. So I'm always trying to think of like, if I'm skipping through, if you find yourself skipping through, especially if you're going back and listening to your own stuff as a radio person, like there's probably a lesson in there about brevity.
Plus, since you are syndicated, it's not like you can talk for a long time in a row. You have to get to the break, the traffic, the music, all that.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's this. Even if you're not syndicated, there's still a schedule. It's maybe not as rigid. Meaning, if you go over the top of the hour a little bit, it's not a big deal. But in syndication, it's a bigger deal because you may be costing some of your affiliate spots. That they can't run in a different hour because it's out of the contract. So you're creating more of a headache. Not that you can't do it, but you're creating more of a headache. I heard a great story. I had a lunch with my old program director from when I worked in New York at K-Rock in like the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001. Anyway, named Steve Kingston. I was having lunch with him, and he was telling me how he was constantly having to talk to Howard about, because Howard would just decide how many commercials he was going to play and didn't give a shit. So he'd be like, that's enough commercials. And they come back from break. And so whatever commercials were still left to play, they just set them aside. And then he'd go to the next commercial break and go, yep, that's enough of those. And instead he would only be willing to play a certain number of commercials, even though K-Rock was selling the shit out of his show and they had all these commercials. So that's why if you listen to the show back in the day, when you get to the last commercial break, it would be a 25, 30-minute commercial break. Because those are all the commercials that he had just skipped during the course of the show because he didn't feel like playing them.
Yeah.
And they were taking up too much time in his show. I can't imagine, I don't imagine there's a radio person on terrestrial radio right now.
1025, the 1025, the Bone does that. We'll have like 18-minute breaks.
Yeah, but I don't know who could just get away with like just pushing everything, especially on a syndicated on a syndicated show, like just pushing everything to the very end of the show and having a 30-minute stop set just because you decided that you weren't going to play any more commercials.
Do you think people were even listening to all 30 minutes, or was everybody tuning out at that point?
No, everybody knew it was this long commercial break, and all that really did, Howard didn't care, because when he would take that break, it was at the end of his show, the very end of his show, and he would hit that commercial break. And Steve was telling me that sometimes Howard would be home before the wrap-up of his show would air. Like before you go, all right, Fred, what's the plug? And, Howard would be already at home, and he'd be able to hear that at home because the commercial break was so long. And the only person that really screwed in this case was Steve Kingston and whoever was on the air after Howard that day on K-Rock.
Now, what were some of the best parts about his show back in the day? To me, it was the way he was able to get everybody to open up, his cast. And I like Robin Quivers. I like the way they have their rapport back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, and this is one thing that I've definitely borrowed from Howard. It's just like if you work on his show, you are in some way part of the show. It's not just, Howard and Robin and Fred and Gary. Like you also have all the other people that are, back in the day, at least the Stuttering Johns and whoever, the engineers and whoever was involved, whoever was around, the general manager, Tom Chiasano, same kind of thing. And on my show, I have production people, I have producers, obviously the people who are in the studio with us, and so they all have an opportunity to kind of chime in, and I like that because I think the more perspectives, the better, and especially if everybody's kind of, at least like on our show, everybody's kind of from a different walk of life. So I really always enjoyed that about Howard. Of course, the legendary Whack Packers and some of that, and the interviews. I mean, his interviews are great because he gets stuff out of people that nobody else would get, because there's a certain thing about being a celebrity, interviewing a celebrity. And when you're the celebrity being interviewed and you're being interviewed by a person that you consider to be a celebrity that you're a fan of, like you want that person to be like half the time those people are sitting there trying to impress Howard. Like they want to do a good job for Howard because they're a fan. And so that's just way more than you're going to get in just a regular terrestrial setup. And I think a lot of people fool themselves thinking, well, I'm going to ask these like really intimate, tough questions, or, these really, these really kind of off limits questions, or getting into someone's, childhood. Did that upset you when your father left? Howard can get away with that. Like you cannot. And it's kind of knowing your place and, and not ruining it for the rest of us.
Now, Woody, when it's all said and done, what do you want the legacy of the Woody Show to be?
No idea, man. A legacy. I don't know. Like I said, every day I'm just kind of, I would say, like, nobody hates me more than me. And I'm amazed as anybody else that, I still have the job, or, that we're, like I said, that we're doing what we're doing. So, my best thing I can always say is that we kept it on the rails for as long as we did. That I was able to hold it together for as long as we have, and then that's pretty much it. Like I said, anything that happened after getting full time on the radio has just been a bonus. So whenever it ends, to me, it'll be, wow, I can't believe it lasted that long.
Dude, I've asked people this before, all the interviews I've done with radio people, and some of them will go for like a 3-minute speech about how great they are. It's so funny.
Yeah. I mean, and, in a lot of ways, I think that's good, because you have to, like I said, do the job, and to do it well, you have to have some kind of swagger. You have to have some kind of ego in some way, shape, or form, but I think there's also a lot of like, people think we're curing cancer out here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we're just, our job is to just have fun or be interesting, or whatever your station is, or whatever your role is, what type of station that you're on and what kind of show you're supposed to provide, just do that. If you want to go save the world, go save the world. I don't think you're going to do it doing a radio show.
Now, if people want to check out your show, how can they find it?
Is that really a question anymore?
Yeah.
I think people go to Google, they type in The Woody Show, and then podcasts come up, and it'll be on all, oh, The Woody Show on this station, that station. So, yeah, podcasting and live streaming, or you live in one of the markets where the show is carried.
Well, dude, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. I appreciate the advice you and Menace have given me over the years, and keep up the good work, Woody.
By the way, Menace says that you are the best at asking for advice and then never taking it.
I take it.
He says that you are the best at asking for advice, but then never taking the advice. Now, I don't know what advice Menace has given you, and if he's speaking from personal experience, you're probably better off not following his advice.
Well, but I don't even know what it would be. He wanted me to listen to like a Jimmy Iovine interview with Howard, and it took me 5 years to find it because they finally added every interview on the Sirius app. Menace won't respond to me anymore. He is annoyed with me. I don't even remember. He's given me good advice, but it's a long business, I would love to talk to Menace, but he just does not reply to my text. So I'm like, okay.
No, Menace is the guy who works on my show. If anybody listening and not familiar, but Menace kind of spreads himself thin. I don't know if that's intentional. See, that's another question for a therapist. Why do you spread yourself so thin intentionally?
I think it's because we want to be big in radio. At least for me, I feel like the goal is to be big. So for me, it feels like if I take a day off of radio, the world's going to end, and I have to remind myself it's not.
No. How about make a living working in radio, and then just take advantage of the day and the opportunities that come, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself.
Sounds like a plan, bro. Thank you, Woody.
All right, Hoppy.
All right, dog.
All right, man.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.
Money. And like that, he's gone.
Hoppe Hour is now over. Hoppe Hour is now over. Hoppe Hour is now over.